Taxes are the only certainty. Will 20% of people have society? And I have made it on my own in this world. Will not take care of time around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna stop the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna stop the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And welcome, socialist think tankers or socialist tank thinkers, to the 55th edition of Political Unmuted. It is so good to have you here. Now, just a couple of things before we start. I know that we have listeners from all over the world, and some of you are having horrific weather, and God bless you. I'm so sorry from what we're hearing from all over the world. But here, you have to understand, the north of England is in a very unaccustomed heat wave. So if you see your speakers tonight visibly wilting and falling asleep, it's because we've been absolutely cooking. And you remember it said we got Neanderthal blood in our vein to be able to allow us to, genes to allow us to cope with the cold. And so this is just too hot. And I was gardening all morning and I've been decorating all afternoon. So if you see me sort of freeze, It's not the computer that's gone wrong. It's my old bones that have finally given up the way. Excellent. Lovely to see you. Great to see you. Gosh, great show for you tonight. It's so exciting. And I'm going to welcome sort of our guest. Big fuss over Paul Daly, the star of the show, the leader of the socialist think tank, the tech guru who puts it all online and sort of, and generally a decent, good guy. Lovely to see you, Paul. Hi.
Hi. I don't. Why the big fuss?
I'll tell you in a little while. So
Okay,
Stuart, the strong, silent type who always comes out with those brilliant statements, sort of one of the nicest, kindest men you could ever hope to meet. Hi, Stuart.
Yeah.
And Samantha, and sort of very, very important member, the county councillor, sort of Miss Shildon or Mrs. Shildon, basically our recourse when we want to know anything about Durham County. Hi, Sam. And the reason is for this, of course, that we've got a guest today, and I'm now going to pay a lot of attention to my guest. And I've always thought it wasn't fair that I make such a fuss of the guest, and the normal guests, they just sort of get, oh, yes, you're just normal. And so I made a big fuss of the normal ones as well. Hiya, Tina.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, we're great here. Now, I'm now going to sort of subject you to intense questioning because everybody out there wants to know who you are. First of all, tell us about yourself. Who you are? What do you do? We'd love to know.
The International Woman of Mystery, is that what you're getting at, John?
We've never had an International Woman of Mystery. If you can be that, yes, please.
Well, I'm not one of those either. You know, pretty bland, pretty boring. Just love a bit of chit chat, love a bit of politics, love a bit of socialism. I think, you know, some people do know me from appearing in socialist think tank programs before. I'm an ex-parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party for my sins. I survived that. I'm still alive, fighting fit, just about in this heat wave. Us Irish people are similar to yourselves in the northeast. We're not really used to this like hot, burning thing in the sun, and it's, you know, like running and hiding and then complaining about it for the rest of the year that we don't get to see it. But hey ho. No, thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to this tonight. Thank you.
Such a delight. I saw on your because I was
were you stalking me, John?
Profile, yes. I saw that you're a member of the campaign to reinstate, or you were advertising the campaign to reinstate Jeremy Corbyn.
Of course.
The Labour
what
Party.
Socialist wouldn't?
Sort of, tell me what you think of the current. Well, I think you were telling us earlier that they've actually taken the decision to expel hundreds of members who want that kind of thing. What's your opinion on that?
Well, how long have you got? We'll be here all night chatting about this if you let me go off on one. But no, I've just got to say that, you know, it's a bit of a farce, really. You know, it's pretty much posturing, isn't it? I mean, the only way that you're going to get to expel members is, you know, from particular organizations is if you have evidence of people being in their organizations. So good luck to them trying to find those people. I think it'll be fun to watch in the coming months. But I just think it's, you know, it's deeply sad, deeply worrying, and also, you know, quite funny that, you know, this is where the adults now back in charge seem to be focusing, you know, their attention on. And I think there's a hell of a lot of things that the leadership of the Labour Party could be focusing on at the moment, in brackets, pandemic, close brackets. And that's just the start of it, you know, but to be focusing on such a, you know, a limited amount of people. But I just think I would like to know, I mean, the majority of the electorate aren't going to know who half of these people are, half of these organizations are. And I think for someone who stood on a platform of unity and a platform of kind of non-factionalism, as the leader stood on whenever he was running to be leader, I just think it's, you know, the hypocrisy, you know, is shining through to everybody. And I'd like to know what, you know, the general public are thinking, you know, when they've seen, this leadership proposal that he put together, new leadership. It's all, about unity, and I'm going to be the person to bring people together. And then all that he's ever done since he's come in it is act in a factional way. So I'd be interested. I would like to know if anybody has any, questions tonight. It would be interesting to see what, people's opinion is.
And I just have one more question. I got sort of. I'm going to take another couple of minutes with the welcome. So we're going to devote a sixth of the show to the welcomes. Do you think it's possible for a Marxist to be a member of the Labour Party?
Why wouldn't it be? It should be the natural home of a Marxist. However, I think the current form of the Labour Party and the history of the Labour Party, this is another conversation, is maybe not what many members of the Labour Party think that it is, what it functions as. And my opinion of that may differ to some others, and maybe that's a whole other show that we'll get involved in. And no doubt Paul will be messaging me later on to see whether I want to come on and rabbit on about it. But I do think that, there is this notion of there being a broad church, but I think the broad church only appeals to one wing of the party, and the rest are not included in that broad church. They're maybe too broad for the church.
Thank you very much indeed.
Listen to me being all diplomatic tonight and not giving it all large.
Well, we hate it when people are diplomatic. We love it when you're indiscreet. I remember when I joined the Labour Party, there were an awful lot of people who had been communists in the 1930s, and they switched to Labour after the war. It's crazy that you to think that the two things are incompatible. The other thing is that I am famous on this show for loving an Irish accent. And
you'll be sick of mine by the end of the show.
Delighted to note that Neil Terry loves an Irish accent too. So because Samantha gets cross with me when I say so. And so thank you, Neil. A bit of solidarity. Us lads have got to stick together. Anyway, I am now going to move on to and I noticed that my finger is proof that I was doing the decorating this afternoon. The moment of the week. Who am I going to start with? Sam, what's your moment of the week?
Thank you. So yesterday, the government published its next 50 schools that are part of its school building project. So this is now 100 schools that the government is going to rebuild. In my ward, we have a school that is so badly in need of rebuilding that you're not actually allowed in it anymore. They've actually there are no children being attending the school, and the school's on two sites, and they've got all the kids being educated on the other site. But sadly, for reasons beyond my comprehension, that school hasn't made the cut for the school rebuilding programme, and a school which is in perfect working order in Aycliffe, which is the next town over, has made the cut for the school building project, and it's an academy as well, the one that has been granted the funding. So it's a bit of a mystery as to why our school is seemingly less in need of rebuilding than theirs. It's yes, my door has opened. I have had to open my door because otherwise I'll die. So it's frustrating. I mean, I was really angry this morning because it's a huge problem for our town. We really need that funding. But I've now gone on to the purposefulness of trying to drive home why that is. And I've got a meeting on Friday, and I'll push forward with it then. But so, yeah, really frustrating news for people who are fans of children being able to be educated in buildings which actually have intact sewers.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, sort of the and of course Greenfield in Newton Native surviving on kind of pods of they're just putting units on top of each other in the temporary units on top of each other. Hot socialists die in small cupboards. They do indeed, Neil Terry. but that's why Tory's hiding fridges. Think of that. Sort of, Stuart, your moment of the week.
I'll keep it humble. I was given a sausage roll by a man. So, no, what I was doing, I was out in Newton Aycliffe campaigning over the universal credit uplift, making sure that we keep the 20 quid. I had a comrade there helping me out, and a gentleman came over with coffee and sausage rolls, and he made sure that we could continue on, and kept us fed, and that was really heartwarming. I really like the people in Newton Aycliffe.
Yes, it's just you don't need much encouragement to feel heartened and on it. But what you were doing there, Stuart, was just so vitally important. This £20 is, and of course, Sam will be able to tell us that last week the county council decided the powers that be that it wasn't going to make a public statement. It was going to be quietly around the back door. Tina, moment of the week.
Well, it would be wrong of me not to include a big kick at the Labour Party, whenever I'm given a bit of the moment of the week. And I think many of us were shocked today. I think, you touched on it slightly earlier about the fact that organisations are being prescribed from the Labour Party. But I think, there's a little bit more to this as well. Maybe I think what has seemingly been overshadowed by the 1,000 or so members or whatever it's going to be that are going to be excluded is the fact that 90 staff members are being handed their redundancy packages today because, the state of the party finances is that they're not going to be able to pay wages very soon. But on the grapevine, I'm hearing that apparently there is some temporary staff that are being hired through agencies. Don't quote me on this. I'm just saying this is what I'm hearing on the grapevine. So it sounds a little bit like fire and rehire. But I'm sure more is going to come out about this, in the coming days and weeks. But I just think it's a very sad situation. It's a bit of an indictment on how poor the leadership is. That maybe a couple of years ago we were the biggest party in the whole of Europe, thriving. Jeremy had taken us from in the red into the black, and now we're shedding staff in the middle of a pandemic, and we're the party of the workers and workers' rights, etc., etc. It just feels like it's just going. What more can you say that isn't really going down the road of let's be here all night being negative about Keir Starmer and his inability to manage the Labour Party?
Well, it's a regular story on here too. Who's there? Is it Paul? You're the only person who I haven't asked. What's your moment of the week?
I just need to comment very briefly on someone's YouTube name. Will-Eyed Wani is a tremendous name. Brilliant. But anyway, so thanks for that comment. Mine's going to be Jeffrey Bezos. Jeffrey Bezos. Jeffrey Bezos. You did it. He's gone to space. And
Could they not have left him there?
Yeah, I'm wearing a little NASA t-shirt today because that was when things used to be funded by the public, sort of in a weird anti-communist way. But anyway, they used a load of socialism to get to space before, and they used it for the good of humanity. But now it's just billionaires doing genuine supervillain stuff. And you've got what Tina's just described in the Labour Party. In the Labour Party, there's a pandemic on. There's billionaires literally acting as if they're supervillains, and people's lives being destroyed. And there's been I've just read a book called Cokeland, which is all about Charles Koch, who has spent 50 years just poisoning the public's mind with fake things about climate change and putting doubt in people's minds because he's got an oil industry to fund his massive billionaire habit. And it's yeah, but let's focus on 1,000 people who have liked a Facebook page in the Labour Party. It's embarrassing. The world is in an absolute mess, and anyone who's got any decency about them whatsoever should all be uniting together. But instead, people are just letting this this idea. Oh yeah, they've earned their money. They've earned their right to go to space. Who am I to say that someone shouldn't earn more in their lifetime than anyone should do in 34,000 years? It's like, Howie, man.
Don't be such a communist, Paul.
Anyone know what a billion is? There's a brilliant video I saw the other day where he wrote a million, and then he wrote a million loads and loads of times, and there was just like chunks and chunks of them. And he's like, right, I'll get rid of a million there. You won't be able to see it. It's utterly ridiculous amounts of money. And him going to space is probably like most like people buying something like, I don't know, a bag of crisps or a chocolate bar, that kind of like, I won't miss that. I won't miss that space money. I'll just go to space. It's embarrassing where this world has ended up, and all of a sudden we're seeing like climate change looking like, feeling like it's really happening. Like I think is it 19 out of the last 19 of the hottest years on record have been in the last 20 years, or something like that. So we're seeing these real things, these real actions of this nasty, sort of selfish, awful mentality, and you've got the so-called left caring more about some people who want to see socialism. It's embarrassing.
Thank you, Paul. Very sobering.
But I started off quite funny though, and if anyone's confused, have you seen Bo Burnham's Inside? Has no one seen that? So will have no clue why I sang about Jeffrey Bezos. Right, okay. We'll maybe put the link up later on to the song.
We assumed you were being sarcastic.
There's a song.
We assumed it was irony. Okay, let's move on, everybody.
Now it's time for the big story.
I was a bit surprised when this hit top spot on the poll. Really? So, Sam, tell us all about it. And is Chris Hood with us on the? Is Chris Hood, because it'd be. I think I'd appreciate somebody other than me trying to hold Sam to account for it. Because I don't really wholly know. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Sort of listen to what Sam's saying, and then because you may want to come back about it. Sam.
Okay, so this is Durham centric, I'm afraid, but I'm sure most people will be able to understand the themes and understand why it shocked quite a few people. So the Labour Party put a motion forward in Durham County Council talking about the state of the funding crisis, and as everyone will know, councils have a lot of responsibility for child and adult social care. So one of the kind of resolutions of the motion was to call on the government to solve the funding crisis in social care. So as happens, the motion was amended by the people who are currently in power in Durham County Council. But one thing, and most of it was just moving words around a little bit, didn't really change the overall sentiment of the motion, except that the deputy leader of Durham County Council chose to highlight this idea of there being a care crisis, and on video, clear as day, in the makeshift council chamber that we have, said that there was no funding crisis in adult social care, and that the Labour group should get their information from facts and not primary school level BBC reports. That was the first really insulting, demeaning thing he said about the Labour group that day. There were many more, mostly focusing on our use of social media to communicate with our constituents, which I also thought was a bit weird. So, I mean, for me and for many other people in the room, it was just very much sort of, what planet are these people living in? I know somebody in my community who hasn't had a bath since Friday and probably won't get a bath until next Friday, when his not being able to access his bath in his home becomes an emergency. I don't know under what situation you think an adult human being able to access basic hygiene during a heat wave is not a crisis? But that's where we are. So obviously the Labour Party reacted very emotionally. A lot of us are carers. I'm a carer. So it's really hard to hear people say things like that when you know what's happening on the ground. But yeah, it's strange, very strange. But that this is where we are.
Is this not a case of willful mishearing, sort of on both parts? Because the motion said the crisis in child and adult social care, and he just chose to ignore the word child. And his comments were about adult social care, and so there was a deception going on there, and there were two points. The first thing is, if he talked about child social care, he would have had to accept that the county council has pumped millions in to keep that afloat. But he chose to focus on adult social care, and he had 2 points. I was thinking, I remember him talking. One, that they hadn't had to pump any money into adult social care, and two, that the Labour group had chosen not to take the 3% social care premium all at one go, but to spread it over a number of years. And therefore, this to him proved that the Labour group realised there wasn't a crisis in adult social care. Now, I mean, the issue about the 3% social care grant is absolute trickery, because you could take it all at once, or you could spread it over. And there's a big debate about it, and we agreed to spread it over the years rather than get the money up front and then wonder what the hell we were going to do the next 2 years. I was part of that decision. But it is true, is it not, that the county council has not had to pump money into adult social care the way that we've had to pump it into child social care.
Yeah, that seemed to be the thrust of his argument, which obviously forgets that there are lots more revenue streams available for adult social care than there are for child social care. You know, a child who is orphaned or is estranged from their parents because of alcohol misuse can't get a job and work for 20 years and buy a house in order to pay for their care. But it's just, this is because what has happened is the Conservatives have got where they are based on the idea that the Labour Party have been reckless with their money and we charge too much council tax. And now they are in the driving seat. They have found that the previous decisions made by the council were based on solid financial advice by experts, and that they aren't going to be able to fulfill their promises of reducing or freezing or reducing the speed of council tax increases, because actually it's the government's advice for councils to increase council tax in order to plug the funding gap that they have created.
Smashing, thank you. So to Chris Hood, I'm watching the stream. Anything you say, we will repeat. We can't speak to you about this, but we can take what you say, make sure that side of the argument is placed. Paul, what's your comment on this?
I do think a lot of people do live in a different world, and I think when I think Chris has just made a comment saying that he doesn't agree with what this councillor is saying, and Chris knows full well what the realities of this situation are. What I think is that a lot of people see Labour and Conservative as they're all the same. They're all the same, and when they see people like us getting really annoyed that someone voted for a Conservative to be in charge of education, for example. Well, I'm in education and it's an absolute mess because of the national Tory policy. And the local people are agreeing with those, with what the national government have done. We know from speaking on the predecessor from this show with people like Paul Howell that they agree with what the national government are doing. They agree with academisation, which a lot of people in the Labour Party do. They agree with like the reduction in social care. They agree with austerity. They agree with all these things. These people are the architects of the problems that we're in. And I'm not saying everyone in the Labour Party is perfect, but there are some out of touch and in a lot of cases quite nasty people in local politics who are conservatives. And I just couldn't possibly bring myself to associate myself in any way with a person like that. Although I could say that for some people in the Labour Party, some people in the Labour Party lately have been absolutely disgraceful on like things like, on racism. And I see Trevor Phillips has just been allowed into the party. So this isn't like everyone in the Labour Party is good and everyone in the Conservative Party is bad. But the vast majority of people in the Conservative Party, unless they've been living under a rock and they don't know what the Conservatives stand for, ideologically, I could never agree with people like that. So therefore, this came as no surprise to me because they do not understand how ordinary people live their lives. And you don't need to live that life. You don't need to have experienced that yourself to try and find these things out. Like I, as a teacher, see all sorts. I see affluent kids. I see like poorer kids who have nothing, and I'd see everything in between. And Lord, there's so many problems. And I think it's so easy to dismiss that if all you've ever done is work in an accountant's office or had your own business, or you just see that your tenants as being like some kind of scum, which a lot of them do because they're all big landlords, or a lot of them are. And it's that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess that's what I've got to say about it.
Thank you, Paul. I'm looking at what Chris Hood has said. Doesn't agree with Councillor Bell. He believes that there is a crisis that needs looking at urgently by central government. And he then goes on to say what he thinks about proposals in 2019 and the respect and awe he has for those people who work in care and unpaid carers throughout the pandemic. However, he did vote for the amendment because instead of just writing to the PM, it wrote also to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Thank you very much, Chris, for those comments. Stephen Patterson, who has, of course, direct experience of adult social care, says that the crisis is because providers have given up asking for financial help. It's been pointless because it falls on deaf ears. There's little point in berating DCC because they are the farmers, and the grain merchant said no. My client group were disabled from birth and never managed to acquire assets. There are also almost no private funders in learning disability care. If we weren't debt-free and had income from investments, we wouldn't be able to operate. And apparently there's no crisis.
There shouldn't, sorry to interject,
no, Gina,
I just get really, I mean, that last comment, maybe I picked it up wrong, but is that person saying that they're disadvantaged because there's no private investment in their healthcare?
No, what he was saying is that the only reason that his home manages to continue to function to care for these people is because they have access to private investments.
Which is exactly the problem. And sorry to, this irks me, and this is part of a wider conversation. Paul, this is where I'm going to completely contradict you because, and not often that we do this, but the Labour Party is no different to the Conservatives. They do not believe in the welfare state. And this is what we're talking about here. This is what we're talking about when we talk about adult social care, when we talk about child social care, when we talk about the NHS, when we talk about all public services. The Labour Party is no different. And that's what, you come to realise after time within it when you see what people are arguing for and what certain wings are for. And the whole idea is that it's taken away the state responsibility for our health and well-being, and we've seen that across quite a lot of streams, including education. The Labour Party are no different. What we're actually fighting for at the moment is the maintenance of what's left of our social welfare state. And we should be fighting for that as socialists. And that's what we should be trying to champion, not just within the Labour Party, but within society itself. Nobody should be relying on private investment for any sort of healthcare whatsoever. And I think that this is what's remiss from society at the moment. And this is, where we need to really be talking about. And whether it's a local council, whether it's a county council, or whether it's central government, what we should be talking about is how the economy functions, how money is created, and how it is spent. And unless we get to grips with what really happens in how money is created from the Bank of England and how taxes really operate. Taxes, there isn't just a big money pit of taxes for the government to give out. Oh, we'll proportion Durham County Council this amount of the pot, and and whatever Essex County Council can have this amount of the pot. The pot doesn't exist. Money is created from the Bank of England. It's given out in its proportions, and then we create taxes are brought back in to balance the economy, to balance inflation. And until we stop with this notion of handbag economics that was brought in by Thatcher, we are never going to get people to come back around to the idea that we can have fully funded public services, and we deserve to have fully funded public services. And, I've kind of broken free, I think, from the whole notion of conservative bad, Labour good. There's a lot of them, and the majority of them are all the same, and they all are capitalists who believe in the free market, and they believe that you get what you give, and you pay in and you can take out what you pay in. No, we have to fight for something different.
Spot on. I'm sure Stephen would agree with you, by the way. So they're absolutely word for word. And of course, just the government this week floated an idea for how you can not lose your home. And they're going to set up, because of needing social care, and they're going to set up some kind of insurance scheme, which will be offered to you in the 2 years after you retire. And it's exactly the same thing that you're going mad about, Tina. Last word, Stuart, on this.
People were quick to back up the fella to say, well, there's no crisis in social care, is there? But just today, there's a headline saying Boris Johnson considering raising national insurance to fund social care reforms. The Tories know they need to reform. They know it's a crisis. But local Conservatives and Lib Dems will give this man who denies the damage, the hurt, the lives lost, right? It's basically just said, didn't happen. There's nothing to worry about. Gives him a free pass. That irks me.
Yeah, to carry on hurting people. Vonnie, Labour is now part of the establishment. Isn't that exactly what happened? For a while, we weren't part of the establishment. For a while, we were criticising the establishment, and we came so damn close to making it stick. And sort of the establishment turned its fire on Labour, and sort of Labour's reaction was not to say, right, next time we're going to score the penalties and win the game. Sort of Labour's, oh golly, we've got to be part of the establishment. Oh dear, we're going to get rid of all these troublemakers. And so absolutely spot on. Right, okay. Other questions? Everybody's still going mad about social care. Great. I'd love to see it. And secondly, a lot of love for you, Tina. We love a good rant. Paul, right, okay, 3 questions. We have 25 minutes. That's 8 minutes a question, 2 minutes each person. Please note, watch the clock, okay? Paul, Outrage aimed at number 10 as MPs back a 4 billion cut to foreign aid.
Okay, so there's something built into this. So they decided that there was a 0.7% foreign aid budget. And this has actually been quite a controversial thing in very right-wing or nationalist circles. So, like, UKIP people, for example, have been banging on about this for a while about, oh, why don't we look after our own before we look after other people? So that's always been a thing. But then when it comes to it, they don't want to look after their own either because they're like, oh, now these people claiming benefits so they can feed the families. So they'll get really upset about that. So Boris Johnson and his cronies have decided that they are going to cut the foreign aid budget from 0.7% to 0.5%, which equates to about 4 billion of the economy. Now, he said it was to try and, like, you know, because tough times, you need to do less, but actually that's built in because it's a percentage of how well you're doing rather than just a fixed sum. So it's not really because you're facing harder times. That's built in. But actually, like, you've had 3 former prime ministers who've come out heavily against this: Theresa May, David Cameron, and was it Gordon Brown
Major.
as well?
John Major.
It was John Major, so it's 3 former Conservative ones. Now, if they want to do this, this is actually used as a way to influence other countries as well. I don't think it is giving them no strings money. It's a way to influence them, and they think it's like losing your standing in the world. And they do talk about people starving and stuff. Well, you could do a lot better than that. You could do debt forgiveness. If they actually cared, you could just forgive the debt that they've paid 90 times over or whatever. So, like, I'm not 100% sure that, like, people are making the right arguments here about this is an absolutely brilliant thing that they do. They do it for a reason. The foreign aid budget is actually a calculated thing to have influence in other countries. But at the same time, is it any use to anyone if people around the world are poor? Is it any use? Like, in the world that we're in, we should be looking after one another. We're all supposed to be brothers and sisters. We're all supposed to be helpful to one another. So that's the kind of basis behind everything. I'm not 100% sure it's as cut and dried as Boris Johnson or the former Tory prime ministers would like to say.
Thank you. Tina, is it, somebody's saying this is just racism. Is it racist to cut foreign aid?
It's populist. It's the Conservatives doing what they do best, which is, you know, thinking that this is what the majority of people think, or the majority of their voting sort of demographic think, so that's what they're going to go with. But just a couple of points on this. One is that I really dislike how they try to report these things, which is a cut from 0.7 to 0.5. What does that mean to the average person on the street? The average person on the street thinks, well, that's next to nothing. It's not even 1%, you know, so that's why they report it like that. 2 is that foreign aid, as Paul rightly suggests, is political. It is largely given to governments to do whatever they want with, and they will use it really badly. So I think that there's better ways that it can be used. Thirdly is that the leader of the opposition decided to say that, you know, this is something that the Labour Party should be fighting against. They really should be. And I was really angry by this, I'm sure you can tell. But the fact that the Labour Party leader stated in the House of Commons that nobody in the opposition or in the House in general thought that we should return after the pandemic to 0.7%, I found absolutely disgraceful. I was absolutely fuming. I just, you know, I was so angry because he certainly wasn't speaking for, I would hope, a proportion of the Labour Party. It should be the entirety. The other thing is that, touching on something that Paul has said as well, I mean, many people will know I've said on this show before that my husband's in the army. I've worked for a veterans charity as well. And a lot of the right-wing arguments when it comes to reducing aid is about our soldiers, you know, they could be providing for veterans here on the streets. Well, yes, they could, and they should, and everybody should be provided for, but there doesn't need to be a choice between the people in need in the UK and the people in need in countries that have largely been deprived due to colonialism and imperialism of the United Kingdom. So I think, there's many ways to look at this, but I think there just needs to be a little bit of education about what it is, what it should be, and what it could be.
Thank you. And you the next question, sort of, Sam, has the Labour Party not behaved appallingly on this also?
I mean, I do struggle, and I do try and avoid talking about the National Party because it is depressing, the level of opposition that we seem to be offering. And I don't know whether it's just not reaching me on the media that I listen to, but also very few people who I talk to seem to feel like the Labour Party are offering serious opposition on most things. And I think that there are huge problems with this. For a lot of people, it was a racist dog whistle, and while the Labour Party are narrowing their broad church to a more sort of centrist sort of membership after today's move, the Conservative Party are really playing to those far right voters and really trying to make gains in that sector of the population who might have previously voted for UKIP or the BNP. So I think nationally, that's a more worrying trend, that our government is getting more and more far right.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, and a good point. Finally, last word, Stuart. As always, we're looking for the bon mot here.
It's economically illiterate to lower the amount of aid we give, because we don't just send bundles of cash in duffel bags. We say, hey, you want to build a bridge? We'll support you to build this bridge for your transport plans, but you've got to buy the bridge from us, and you've got to pay British workers to come and put it in. Or if even they're getting military aid, we don't give them a nation a blank check to go buy airplanes off China. They have to buy planes that were built in Britain. This is supporting British jobs. This is cutting support that goes to our sectors. It's madness.
Thank you. And agreed. Tina, this is the question about basically racism, which has just been whipped into a storm by the England defeat. Johnson and Patel have been caught out being hypocrites, really, and there's a lot of criticism being aimed at the social networks. What do you make of all this? Share your ideas with our listeners.
Well, I think the one thing that's really kind of frustrated, well, there's quite a few things that frustrated me about this, but it's no surprise that Boris Johnson and Priti Patel, and I struggle to call them their names because there are other things I would really like to call them, and I think they deserve to be called.
I think censorship's on.
Yeah, very much so. I'm doing quite well with the self-censorship tonight. I've learned the lesson, from the last time. But I think, to be quite honest, it didn't surprise me the level of hypocrisy that they've shown. We know that Boris Johnson's a racist, and I don't care how many times you want to send out Robert Jenrick to appear on any TV program to say, oh, poor Priti Patel suffered racism. Well, just because you've suffered racism doesn't mean you can't be racist. Let's just, lay that one aside. Anybody can be racist regardless. I think the thing for me is that two things that have annoyed me, aside from the actual racism itself, because that's, we're annoyed about that. But let's look at the other issues. The other issues are this, that there seems to have been we seem to have moved on very quickly from the issue was that, there's a huge swathe of, the English public that are very racist. We've seemed to have moved on from that, and there's other news now happening. That's what happens with the, rollout of 24-hour news and how we're only fed certain things. But the other thing, and this is the thing that really irked me about this story, and it's really, and I just can't let go of this. And the left have played into this just as much as the right. And it's the fact that we're focusing on social media platforms as if racism had never existed before social media. Well, as I commented on my social media platform, no blacks, no dogs, and no Irish was around a long time before social media platforms were invented. Britain is built on racism. And I think that unless the British public fully come to understand and appreciate their history and what they did through the British Empire, we will never be able to tackle the current climate of racism and where it came from. But to lay it on the ground of social media platforms and to kind of focus on the anonymity of certain accounts is all about, it's not about the issue of racism, it's about another issue, which is about control of social media, which is about preventing people who need to have a voice, who maybe don't have the ability or don't want to show their voice. That's got nothing to do with racism. Let's tackle the racism. Let's tackle the blatant racism of our government. Let's not try and blame it on something else. And I think the British public, not all of it, but a lot of the British public do need to come to terms with the history of Britain and how it came to be. And I think then we can tackle the current things.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And you've completely scuppered my next question. So, Stuart, ultimately, Tina's comments lead us to what can be done with it. If the answer is not just to sort of prevent it happening by sort of censorship through the social networks, what can we do to change the basic racist nature of much of our institutions as well as our society?
We need better examples. When you've got leaders who are clearly openly racist, this isn't just setting an example to the racists out there to be more racist. It's also, bringing people who were not racist into the fold. It's creating an atmosphere where children will become racist because that's the experience that they're seeing around them. We need better examples, better educators, not the shit show we've got now.
Thank you. Sam, have you got any comments to make about Johnson and Patel?
I think it's all being covered. They're racist, they're nasty. Look in the comments for some nice alternative names for Priti Patel and add your own.
Thank you very much indeed. And last comment, Paul.
It comes to something when you've got like what appear to be a really nice set of lads with a good set of values for playing for England, which it probably isn't necessarily always associated with football. Serving a massive example. And again, I think it was my moment of the week last week when Tyrone Mings, what he said about Priti Patel. It's like you can't like, basically she was gaslighting everyone, wasn't she? It's, it's terrible, this racism that I stoked. So you've got these people. You had Jordan Henderson wearing rainbow laces when he scored for England and stuff like this. Like, I briefly taught Jordan, and he was a really nice lad, and you can see where that's come from. He's they seem to be the kind of people who I would like to see in Parliament, which is a worry because I can't really see very many of the people in Parliament that I particularly want to be there at the moment. They're just getting it wrong on every issue, and there's people trying to jump on things. They've actually got opinions. They know what's right, and they're following it through. And it's just a bizarre world. I sometimes think that we're living in a parallel universe where the politicians are getting absolutely everything wrong. Boris Johnson, racist time and again. Labour Party really just like trying to be populist and failing miserably, and footballers getting it right. So a lot of respect for them.
One of the things that horrified me was is it Eccleston criticising Lewis Hamilton for his stand on racism and black rights.
Well, yeah, he was. Well, he employed Max Mosley for a long time, who was like Oswald Mosley's son, and and
just dreadful people. But the point that Eccleston was that when Lewis Hamilton begins to lose races, then he will suffer the backlash of his stance on black rights, and just sort of the establishment lining up to rejoice in the possibility that we may devalue black lives, that we may cease to say that black lives matter, and you just, the horror of it all. Right, I'm going to move on. Last question. Sort of before this, I do this, Stuart. I'm going to ask a yes or no question, and sort of has Freedom Day changed your behaviour one iota? Paul?
Yeah.
How?
Everyone at work stopped wearing a mask.
Have you stopped wearing a mask?
Everyone else has, so we're all. I'm not passing on to anyone. We've all been together the entire time. It's a really strange place when you've got like difficult experiences and people spitting in your face and things like that.
It's horrific. Come back to you, Sam. Has it changed you one bit?
I'd like to say no, but it has, because I went somewhere today and I forgot my mask, so I just went in. But I would have gone home before. But I just thought, well, I'm not going home when it's not the law. And also, I'm not scanning in anywhere on my phone, because it takes time and you don't have to do it anymore. So,
thank you. Tina?
Well, unfortunately, living in Scotland, rules haven't really changed here like England has. So, there hasn't really been that day here yet.
Right. Okay, Stuart, summer chaos predicted as one point. I'm just carrying on as before. Summer chaos predicted as 1.6 million in England told to isolate in a week.
Yeah, we're all getting the pings on our apps. We all have to stay in because everything's on the rise. Cases are going wild. And now we're at a point where huge numbers of people are being asked to isolate without the support that they had before, to the level that employers are really worried about staffing levels. I'd heard a couple of them on the radio today, really worried that they wouldn't be able to operate at full capacity, which just kind of shows you this mentality that we've apparently hit some magic threshold where we're all going to be safe and nothing matters anymore, and it's just back to normal, and it's really not, and this is just the evidence of it.
Thank you very much indeed. Leanne Powell, I am being more careful because it's not Freedom Day for people like me who are vulnerable. For some people, the Freedom Day was a scary thing, not a freedom thing at all. We have 5 minutes left, so please forgive me, 3 guests who, if I just sort of say thank you and move on. Okay, Tina.
I think, I maybe have kind of some different views on this kind of on the whole issue of the cases rising and how we move through things, because I think we have to look at things in a way of course, when more people are mixing, there are going to be more cases. And I think the issue isn't so much that case numbers are rising. I think what we have to be looking at are hospital stays, not just a case of someone, going in, oh, I can't breathe, and then, after a couple of hours having to come home. Are long-term hospital cases rising? Are people in ICUs, is that rising? Are deaths rising? And that's what we need to be looking at, because of course the virus is going to spread. That is what a virus does whenever you open up. And I think we can't remain locked down forever, because the issues around being locked down are incredible that a lot of people haven't thought about. The impact on mental illness, the impact of domestic violence, the impact of non-socialization. There are a whole host of issues that need to be looked at, and as well as people's businesses not being able to function, and the economy. And I think all this stuff does need to be balanced, and you can never just assume that, that there's no risk to anything. There is risk with everything. And I think we have to try and get round, how do we open up? How do we look at this? How do we not make people fearful of things that don't need to be fearful of? And how can we balance the fears of what people need to be fearful of, and how we need to moderate that? And I think that it's very difficult to do that whenever you've been pumped full of fear for so long. And I think that's where we need to be careful of what we're looking at, and not, just looking at case numbers as being a case of, oh, we need to lock down because there's a lot of cases.
Thank you so much indeed. Sam, do we need to let COVID off the leash and sort of hope that the vaccination stops it causing too many deaths in ICU people?
Yeah, that was the interesting thing that stuck in my head from the Prime Minister's press conference, that he simultaneously said that we won't have to have another lockdown as long as we're all very careful, but he also said that we really do need cases to rise a bit now, because if people basically, if the people who are going to die don't die now, they'll die in the winter and cause more problems because they'll backlog our NHS. Now, I found that very difficult to hear from the leader of our country. Maybe that is, the brutal reality of it. I'm not sure. But I just think that we could have released some restrictions rather than all of them all at once. I think there would be no harm in keeping masks indoors, for example. I just think it all seems a bit all too much. And especially when you see the news and the news stories of young people sort of running into nightclubs and all like cuddling each other and dancing all over each other because they can, you just think, does this seem like a sensible position for the government to have put us in? Probably not.
Thank you. And Paul, the schools have, of course, out for holidays now. Is that going to help the government achieve its aims of letting off the restrictions without causing a massive crisis of the NHS?
Yeah, it will help because we all know that schools have been driving this infection, because it is the place where families go, like some members of the family go and then they bring it back, and we know this, and I suppose that's part of the attitude when I said earlier on that none of us in our school wore a mask. Pretty much everyone's had COVID, pretty much everyone's double jabbed, and we know that the things that the government were telling us to do in schools were to look like they were doing something rather than actually stop the transmission. Which is why, so when I'm out and about, I'm going to wear a mask. When I'm on public transport, I'll wear a mask. When I go in a shop, I'll wear a mask. But at work, when we've been in that situation that we've been in for such a long time, we're just kind of like, well, this is ridiculous. All the things they've asked us to do. They told us that we could be, that we had to put our mask on in a corridor, but we didn't have to in a classroom. So COVID apparently knew to stay outside the classroom. It's just ludicrous. Everything they've asked us to do is ludicrous. At the moment, if you have a meeting, you have to walk with your mask on and then sit down and then take off. Well, that was last week. Take off your mask when you sat down, because COVID knows if you're sitting down, you shouldn't be going. COVID knows it shouldn't be going into you if you're sitting down. It's just been stupid. It's all been a pretense for a long time now. And he does want it to spread throughout that. So we should be aiming any criticism rather than at one another for not looking after each other. It's these mixed messages and this absolute stupidity that winds people up and makes people not respect the actual restrictions that were in place. And I don't think it's made a blind bit of difference other than we're allowed to have a little bit of fun now.
I have so many things I want to ask you, but we're out of time, Paul. Thank you very much for that. That'll be the last word of our fabulous comments on the comment stream. Thank you so much, everybody. We could have had any one of you on the show. Really good comments coming up there. I advise everybody to read them. For the moment, you know what's going to happen. We're going to go away. When we come back, you'll be rid of me, and you'll have the wonderful Samantha Townsend chairing the meeting. And it's a bit more relaxed, and we get into more of a debate with you, and we look at some of the things you've been saying, and tell you how brilliant you were. So we're going to listen to No Pass Around now for 5 minutes, and we'll gather back sort of in easy mode.
Like the Tories play politics. See you in a second.
My name is Jack Atkinson, I'm not afraid, and I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist's a dead one, they say, and around the rear we are. When I first left all them months ago, I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. Well, for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure, and around the rear we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. I told my mother, now mother be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm a real we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. Fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past those first, and around the rear we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here, no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be pass around here today. Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello. Tap, tap, tap. Is this thing on? I am learning. I've only been doing this for a year. Can't possibly have things all smoothed out and working yet. I'm going to start with Kat Cray's rant because it deserves to be read out. She says, at some point, we need to have a serious discussion about the role public transport plays. It serves a healthy democracy. It's not about getting a banker to work on rush hour, but either way, transport workers are being put at risk through the lifting of restrictions. Aerosol transmission has been deliberately played down by the government, and that is murderous in my view. Kat's voice always deserves a bit of amplification. She always speaks great sense and from experience of what people are actually feeling and people are actually experiencing. And this is the thing. This is one of the things that has been really glossed over, hasn't it? The talk on the TV was all, if I go somewhere where there are elderly people, I might put a mask on out of courtesy, but always forgetting that there are always people with you who work there who aren't going to tell you to mask up, but don't have the choice other than to spend a long time of their day potentially being infected by people who are passing through, and especially on the tube where there's no ventilation at all. I do have lots of sympathy and solidarity for those people. And this is the other thing, isn't it? Because nationally and legally the mask restrictions have been lifted, but actually it's not been restricted on some parts on the tube, but it has been lifted on the overground trains. And it's very confusing, and confusion is a problem in terms of helping to keep people safe. That's something else that Kat told me recently. See, I listen to your Kat, even if my mouth isn't actually working to form words at the moment. So yeah, anybody want to say anything on all of that?
That's part of the reason why I said, like, I'll be wearing masks on public transport and stuff. And also, it's not just that. It's like, when I said I wasn't wearing them at work today, no one was wearing one, and you wear them for other people. So if no one's wearing one, then they're not worried about it anymore. But like, even if there's one person with a mask on in there, probably everyone should, because like, they're probably worried. They're probably thinking, actually, I don't want to catch this. And then you've got to be respectful of people, and you might pass it on to someone who's healthy if you've got it, but that they might pass it on to someone who isn't, and so on. So I think it's about respect for one another and trying to do your best to stop the spread. At the same time, it's such a confused message.
I think the message is confused, yes, but I think this notion that we all have to act like we have a virus that we don't have is a bit ridiculous. And I think that if you look at the evidence on mask wearing, it's even the WHO, the WHO, are saying that mask wearing does not make a difference to the passing on of the virus. The wearing of masks is about public confidence. It's about making people feel safe rather than it actually doing anything. And this is my problem with people who want to criticize people who choose to not wear a mask. And you're not protecting someone. You're actually looking at the science of wearing a mask, and it does not prevent you passing on a virus wearing a mask. It's about making people feel comfortable. It was about, because they spent so long making people fearful of the virus. People weren't going to come out of their houses, so they decided to use the mask so that it made people feel more comfortable about coming out. And I think that we have to be looking at the science on these things, which is that it doesn't prevent spread of the virus and it doesn't prevent people from getting the virus. And I think we have to be realistic about that. I think, there are significant factors which will lead to people, spreading a virus and catching a virus. And, I think, that we do need to, I think the issue that I find more frustrating about it is that individuals are being allowed to attack other individuals and, sort of making people feel guilty for not doing something. And I think we should be given the factual information and being allowed to be led by that rather than what the government are doing, which is individualizing the responsibility. And I think that's the thing that frustrates me more, is that the government aren't doing a public health message. They're just trying to shirk responsibility onto individuals, and that's their issue when we go back to the conversation about social care, adult social care, about child social care, even about welfare. It's all about individual responsibility. And I think that's what the left should be focusing on, not the individual, but the societal responsibility. It doesn't really, though. It really doesn't. Unless you want to walk around in a hazmat suit, you're not going to, it's not going to make a difference. And I think, that, they do really need to be less sort of focus. And I think it's like I say, it comes down to this individual responsibility that they're trying to promote across everything. And it isn't just about masks. It's about everything to do with the welfare state that we have. That's what they're trying to erode constantly, is the societal responsibility over individual responsibility.
Apparently I had no sound there. I had just said it just does depend on the mask, and there's a comment in there from Kat which was saying, like, basically I said the cloth masks do very little but might reduce it marginally, and then the paper ones a bit more, and then the proper 3M like asbestos ones actually do something for the wearer, and that's where we came from there. So sorry you couldn't hear me there.
I think there's an issue with the app. I think this crazy that sort of my son was pinged a couple of days ago and now has to be off work for a week. When he rang his colleagues, the entire team, they're building a motorway somewhere, has to be off for a week. And basically what's happened is somebody on the team has obviously got it. And so despite the fact that they're all taking those tests where you twiddle the stick in your nose and your throat, and they're not being positive, nevertheless, they've all got to stay at home for a week.
It's ridiculous.
So the motorway construction has come to a halt, and sort of and it strikes me as being crackers. That sort of a situation where what you say is your workmate's been pinged, so for God's sake, test yourself every day before you come in. Having said that, the other side of the coin and the worry is that people who've been double jabbed are getting it. They're sick.
But that was always going to be the case.
Not 100% sure, and so that's okay if you're a young person and you can say, "Oh, I'm going to have it," and it'll be very mild. If you're like Leanne, you're vulnerable, then suddenly the fact that even if you're double jabbed, you can still get it again means that the relaxation of particularly mask wearing absolutely undermines your confidence to go out. And Leanne, I think, has said, basically, I'm back in my house now because I daren't go out. It's getting the balance between those two things, between people using the common sense about whether they've got it or not, and a society where, as Paul says, where we respect people's fears and we act in a way to help other people, not just for ourselves.
Yeah, the thing that worries me is that when they said we will bring in COVID passports for places like nightclubs in September, and you're like, why September? I've just seen like 50 young'uns licking each other's eyeballs in this nightclub, and the reason they have to wait till September is because the young'uns haven't had the chance to get the 2 vaccines yet, so they can't give them a vaccine passport if they haven't had the opportunity to get both vaccines, but they are willing to expose them to an unlocked society. So that was another thing that stuck out to me is a bit like, and what we need to remember is the people that the Conservatives are playing to, again, are their voter base every time. So the vast majority of the, people who vote Conservative tend to be older, and they've had their vaccines for sort of 3 months now, and they're going, well, I've had mine, so everybody's had theirs, and that's not the case. So that's a worry as well.
I'm really worried about people on the left supporting vaccine passports. I mean,
I didn't say I
I'm dead against them.
No, I didn't say you did. I'm just saying that I do think that this is something that the left should be massively against. I mean, a few years ago, the left were angry about, digital ID cards, and this is exactly what's coming in with vaccine passports. The statistics show that young people are not very much at risk of the virus. It's forcing people to have a vaccination that they maybe don't want to. We should all be, I mean, whether you're, a supporter of the vaccine or whether you're not, I think that what this is about an individual's autonomy, about what you decide should go into your body. And as a young person, you shouldn't be forced to choose between your social life and something that, you may or may not want to do. And I don't think, vaccine passports, it's something that, it's just unnecessary. Why not have a negative test if that's what we're going to go down? I just think that there's so many things that are being made out to be a sort of way of showing that you care more for society rather than you care for individual freedoms. And a lot of people want to attach that to being, you must be right wing if that's what you think. Well, no, it's about individual freedoms. It is about, the choice that you have as an individual, but looking at things like, in particular, how this will very much quickly go into digital ID cards for the population. And I think it's really scary. I've actually been quite surprised at the lack of pushback from people on the left who, would normally be against this kind of thing.
So I've used one. I've used a vaccine pass because I went to one of the trial events, but you had to for Wimbledon, but it was really, really weird and very worrying. So if you've had the vaccine, it doesn't mean you don't carry it. Doesn't mean you don't carry it, doesn't mean you don't get it, doesn't mean you can't pass it on. What it means is you might not you might become less poorly. Yeah. So why should people with vaccines be treated as different to that? So what happened is, and it was useful in a way that we got in quicker, but it was very uncomfortable when they came along the line and said, right, have you been double jabbed? Yes, I've got my NHS app, and in that you've got your little thing that I had a screenshot of that could have been anyone's, and they scanned it, and then they gave me a little gold wristband, and I walked to the front of the queue, and it was really weird, and I didn't quite like the way we've become a tiered society.
Medical
can
apartheid.
Be a very worrying thing.
Yeah, but really, you've hit the nail on the head there, and this is where I think you cannot seem to have a balanced conversation with people about this, because the moment that you somehow raise a concern or an objection, you're automatically labelled a COVID-idiot. So I have issues with vaccine passports. Now, I am not a COVID denier. My mum had COVID. She was in ICU on oxygen for, 10 days. I am not a denier of COVID. What I'm frustrated about is the miscommunication, the misuse of information, and then the complete inability of the left to articulate an opposition two things that we should be in opposition to. So, you know, like Paul, like you've rightly said, you know, the being vaccinated doesn't stop you getting or passing on the virus. So why should we be looking at things like vaccine passports? Because you can still, regardless of having that passport or not, still pass on or you know, get the virus. And I think that people aren't willing to see past the, oh, we must act for the greater good. There's a benevolence of the left. There's a, oh, we must act for the greater good. You know, we must all stand on the pulpit and we must be the people who act for the greater good, that tends to overshadow what we should be considering here. And what are the implications of not offering opposition to things that we would have offered opposition to before? And I think very quickly we're going to be down the road where a lot of people on the left are going to go, oh, how did we get to where we're all, you know, digital ID and, you know, and we're all this, and how did we get here? Oh dear, you know, when we should be now saying, hold on a minute, let's be realistic about this. We're not denying the issue that there is a virus, but what we should be looking at are the ulterior motives that the authoritarian right-wing government are using and what they're doing to get where they want to be. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm afraid that there are too few people willing to do that on the left at the moment.
I think it's also incumbent on the left to think about how these decisions impact on marginalised communities. I always initially instinctively go to women who are trying to, people with uteruses who are trying to conceive a child. If you are currently trying to get pregnant, you might want a COVID vaccine, but you might choose to do that in 10 months' time rather than right now, if you don't know whether you're pregnant or not. Whether the science says it's safe before, prior, during pregnancy or not, people make decisions about their bodies during and before pregnancy that aren't always based on scientific fact. So when it came up about care homes, that was my first thing. So are we going to force people who are trying to conceive to out themselves to their employers as somebody who wants to get pregnant, therefore probably putting their employment in jeopardy, actually, because a lot of people are working in very precarious ways in care homes. But it goes the same with nightclubs as well. Are we going to say that young women who are trying to conceive actually should stay at home where they're safe? And those kinds of words worry me. But this is the actual impact of these things. And then what if, you know, you are living an identity which does not correspond to your vaccine passport? Because you're in the middle of transitioning, or you are non-binary presenting, and they go, well, that's not you, but it is. That's my medical records, you know. So it's very, very easy to see how this causes issues for people who already have enough on their plate. And like I said, I just don't see the scientific reason. Like, if it was 100% having the vaccine stopped you from being a carrier, then I think that would be a different debate. But we don't seem to have those facts. And like Catherine's just said in the comments, you do have to be careful if you're pregnant. For example, thalidomide, the hormone birth pregnancy test, which I only just found about because it was on the news. Where women took a pill, and basically if you had a period then you weren't pregnant. I mean, that was barbaric already. And it caused birth defects, and of course they are all kinds of things.
But they are actually advising women who are hoping to get pregnant in the near future not to have the vaccine. Pregnant women are not having the vaccine. So I think, you know, what we're talking about is isolating a lot of parts of society, but also when we're looking at, you know, migrants, when we're looking at asylum seekers coming in, you know, to the country, this is what this is all about. And I think the left are being blindsided because the left want to take the moral high ground. Oh, we will look after society. I think we have to take a step back and actually look at what this scenario is. and be realistic about it. And I think, you know, I'm deeply, deeply saddened by the fact that we don't seem to have anybody on the left, you know, willing to stand up and be counted, because they're all too afraid of being labeled a COVID idiot or a COVID denier, or, you know, whatever it may be that may harm their electoral chances. And I think for me, it's really exposed just exactly the merits of the left. And I've been, you know, I'm angry. I mean, I'm not going to deny, I'm very much at the start of the pandemic, you know, when my mom caught the virus, I was completely and utterly terrified by it, and you know, was completely, you know, on board with everything. And then the more that you read, the more that you see, the more the statistics that you look, we have to look at dealing with this in a different way. And I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying that. And I think, you know, that there's a bigger question, rather than maybe taking the moral high ground here, that there's a lot of people affected by some decisions that are being made.
A lot of discussion going on the comments thread, Sam, on this. A lot of polarized disagreement. Stuart, have you got a view on this?
There's lots of things going through my head right now, and there's clearly the idea, you know, that this is going to cause workplace concerns, and for the most part, it's the safety blanket to a child, isn't it? And at the end of the, but from a purely political manoeuvring position, I don't think that this would be too long lasting. Simply on we've got the Tories that are already looking to push through like reforms, so you get voter ID stuff, aren't there? And if you made it compulsory that you had to get a COVID passport, if it was then transformed into, you know, an ID card of some form, what you've essentially done is just given everybody free ID, which completely neutralizes what you were doing before. So I think that this will be a very short, you know, time frame thing, where the comfort blanket will just be pulled away quite quickly. We'll have a couple of years, and then they'll start trialing their new, different ID system over.
I think, like, looking at the comments as well, Tim's, like, obviously, like, rightly really worried about, like, you know, he's had family members die and so on from this. And I don't think anyone's saying that this isn't a reality. It's more I thought it was particularly weird that I was privileged by having my COVID passport because I'd had 2 jabs, when there isn't actually evidence that I will not pass it on if I caught it. I work in a school. And the app really worries me as well, because the app is not protecting anyone. So much so that I think it might actually be random. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. I have a friend whose partner tested positive, who he lives in the house with. Both of them have the app. She tested positive, he wasn't pinged. They're together all the time, with the phones like really close to one another. Both of them with the app on all the time. I've been to Wimbledon. I sat in a stadium with 15,000 people. I wasn't pinged. I'm thinking, how can I not be pinged? Like, there's got to be someone there. I was on trains. I did all sorts of different things. I went to a rally in London. Wasn't pinged. I went to Liverpool. I wasn't pinged. You know, I don't think that app does anything. I don't think it works. I don't think it does anything when you check into a place or anything. I think it's there to make it appear as if something is happening.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there are apps around the world that don't work. I just think the fact that we spent billions and billions and gave a lot of money to one of the friends of the Tories wasn't necessarily to make something work well, given that, like, you know, Ireland managed to do it for €5 million, didn't they? 5 million euros?
Less?
The island.
It was less than that?
And they managed to have a functioning track and trace system before we did, and we spent billions, and I think ours is made up. And that's based upon a lot of people I've spoken to who haven't been pinged, where you think, I've been in close proximity to this many people, whether that's wearing a mask, whether it's not, you know. I should have been pinged. I haven't.
There's some stuff I think that would back that up. And that's the fact that the government said that they'll only enforce your isolation, like legally, if you've been contacted by track and trace, like over the phone. But they won't for the app, which makes me think that they have absolutely no data. You have no idea if it's gone off. That it's not because they don't want to enforce it. It's that they have no practical data that would allow them to.
It's probably a bit like, whenever they do sanctions in the job centre and they've got you've got to do 17% a day. So they have to ping out so many people a day, and it's just random, it's like, oh shit, we've got to ping 1,000 people today. Let's just do this, bing, 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 it's been handled really badly. And I think 37 billion or whatever it costed is just an absolute, it's a pure daylight robbery, when things could be done so much cheaper, and we know that. But where's the anger? Instead of the public being angry with the people in power who have blatantly robbed billions from, the public finances, and then try to tell us that there's no crisis in social care and we don't have the money to fix it, you must pay more. People are angry with each other for not wearing a mask. Get a grip. Let's be realistic here. It's not Joe Bloggs down the road not wearing his mask that's the problem. The problem are the people in power who are making these decisions, who have ripped us off, who are now going to, bring in austerity again. But everybody else people are too annoyed, too angry, and too focused on the wrong things. And I think it's about time people took a step back and realize what the priorities are and how are we going to fix these things.
Schools open with tape on floor. It's like, oh, we'll put some tape on the floor and then they'll walk that way. It's a little bit like I used to say, do you know smoking areas in a restaurant? And it was like having a pissing area in a swimming pool. It permeates. So it's like, well, if you just stay in it, if you just walk this little pathway, that will keep you safe.
Why can pubs only open until 12 o'clock? What happens to the virus after 12 o'clock?
Yeah,
exactly. Why can I can't walk, I can walk around a pub with a mask on, but I have to sit down with it off. What is this? It's just nonsense. And I don't think people are thinking these things through enough. And we're being just made to think of these certain things rather than, hang on a minute, let's step back here and be a bit realistic,
And then Neil, sorry, I don't know if you wanted to bring that in, Samantha. Neil's comment about about Johnson and Sunak being randomly selected for the pilot.
Oh gosh, well that was a bit of light relief, wasn't it? Watching them do the U-turn dance the other day. I was out feeding the chickens when it popped up on our watch that they went, oh, actually we will self-isolate now that we've been battered over the head. And I was just like, why can't you just do the right thing?
I don't understand. I watched that they were all actually...
I wasn't talking to you, Siri. Why can't they do the right thing the first time? Why do they need there to be criticism for them to go, oh, actually, yes, there is no pilot scheme?
It's the thing is, after all these deaths, after all the pain they've caused and every little bit of chaos and these stupid things about like COVID not getting you when you're sitting down and stuff, after all that, they still think we are stupid enough to think that they were selected at random for a pilot scheme.
But why wouldn't they, Paul? Because the majority of the public tend to believe the shit they come out with anyway. They'll pick up the Sun, they'll pick up the Star, they'll pick up the Express, and they'll believe the bullshit that they're told, and they get away with it. They've got away with it for how many years now? They've got away with it for telling us. It goes back to the question that that I raised in the other half of the show, the hypocrisy of Patel and Boris Johnson. They tried to get away with that because they know that if the media buys it, the public will accept it, and then we'll move on to something else, and we'll move on to something else. When it's about time that the public took responsibility for what they believe and what they question and what they do with the knowledge that they gain. If you want to absorb the nonsense that you're told every day, That's up to you, and you must face the consequences. But you cannot and should not take your information from those and think that you're being told the truth. And that's exactly the reason that Boris and Sunak tried to get away with saying that they had that they were selected on that, was because, see, if the media backed them and the public wasn't going to be angry enough, they would have carried on just doing what they want to do. It's always a test. It's a test on how much they can get away with before the public say no. It's the same with Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings does this trick exactly the same way. They go on TV, they float something. If the public aren't angry, it will become a policy. If the public get angry, they'll mediate it a little bit, but they'll still come back a week later with something different. The public need to educate themselves. The public need to get angry, and the public need to do something about it, because until they do, the same thing is going to keep happening and happening and happening.
Well done. Sorry, I'm making cock jokes in the comments. I did come into my allotment on Friday morning to find a visitor, and long story short, he had bloody chicken nits. He had what's called red mite. So now all my chickens have got red mite. So I've got to
Is this like chicken STDs?
Yeah, basically. So it infests the chickens, and it infests the coop. So I've got to treat the chickens, and then I've got to treat the coop. It's a total nightmare. And I've got to wait till I've got some more money, because it's going to cost me lots.
See, I thought when you said cock jokes, I thought you were talking about Jeffrey Bezos's rocket.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about that earlier. Why do you make it look like a penis?
It's exactly like on Austin Powers 2, when it's like it's like
Star Trek and all their phallic symbols.
Yeah. Weird. Why? And I think it was last week that I said, if the billionaires are going to go to space, can they please have the courtesy to stay there? I'm glad more people are coming around to that now. Let's go back to the question that was raised by Mark Lungley, which is, what do people think about Katie Price's drive to make sure people have to show ID to get an account on social media?
Oh.
Jackie jumped in and said, depends on the ID needed. Might get rid of scammers, but might also keep lots of us off these social media accounts. I mean, I can bring in the exact same arguments again, can't I? You know, we're going to look at the most marginalised people in society. Do they have the ID that will allow them to access social media? And for people who are exploring their identity and exploring their sexuality and their gender presentation, you know, it might be difficult for them to get an account that isn't in their dead name, but also domestic abuse survivors. You know, a lot of domestic abuse survivors go on social media through aliases so that they can escape their attackers. So there's so many. I always
Whistleblowers.
Yeah, whistleblowers. Vonnie says it'll be another way to censor communication. And I say that as somebody who has, you know, I have been harassed on social media. I have had people set up probably up to sort of 25 separate Twitter accounts to harass me. And it would be so much easier if the police could have access to their information. But also what you're dealing with there is the British police dealing with social media companies that are often in America. So there's extra issues there about how do our police engage with companies that are not in our country and don't actually have to follow our laws, you know.
What are our laws? Because, like, it doesn't matter whether they know who you are or not. They know who Boris Johnson is. They know who Priti Patel is. They know when they say something racist, and they don't do anything about it. So it doesn't matter who you are. It's not an ID issue. It's the fact that no one seems to care when they do something racist.
Because it's not about that. And this is the issue where we come back to again, that it isn't about anonymity. It isn't about racism. It isn't about people being bullied. What this is about is making sure that people who expose things that governments don't want to be exposed and companies that are wealthy don't want to be exposed are shut down. This isn't about protection of the public. And this is where the left, and I'm going to criticize them again, need to be coming out and making a stand, because if the people, right, if the government who really say that they care about the abuse that people get on social media, they care about racism, they care about these things, well, then they would change the laws that they make in daily society that are racist, that are sexist, that are homophobic, that are, discriminatory against, people who are poor, that are discriminatory against, all sorts of issues. And I think that what people need to do, once again, is take a step back and realize that it's not about the issue they're being told to be angry about, that it's about something else. And I think, this is the thing that they're not doing very well. They're not looking at things through the perspective of what it's actually about, and they're wanting to jump on a bandwagon and get angry,
Does Stuart or John want to come in on this? No.
It's difficult. I mean, I'm on social media on my own name. You're on social media on your own name. Tina's on social media under her own name. Paul's on social media under his own name. Stuart's under his name. And I think it's not the use of noms de plume which is the issue, it's the misuse of them. My niece goes under, and my own daughter go under different names because they are both in jobs that can get them physically assaulted, mind sort of abused on the media. So you think, well, it's absolutely correct that they should be allowed to have an account in a name which doesn't draw attention to them. I think it's very different when you get these people like Hamish McAdder, who are going round just pouring out vitriol and hate, personal nastiness, and I think the issue is not the name you go under, but as Paul says, the accountability at the end of it. And sort of, that when you try to get something done about Hamish McAdder, the police said, well, we don't know who he is.
Yeah, even though I had like 3 pieces of evidence that indicated who he was. The problem is we have the laws in place for these things. We have the Malicious Communications Act, which can actually be enforced against tweets and comments on social media. But if somebody chooses to go via an alias, in order to get, and the social media companies know information about these people, they know their IP address, they know the email account they used to set up their account and things like that. But in order to get that information, the police need a court order in order to force the social media companies to give them that information. So actually what we need is just a little bit more cooperation from social media companies, and then we could get these people prosecuted under the laws that we've got already.
There's not
just for the people who don't know, Hamish McAdder is Samantha's long-term troll on social media, who keeps on setting up new accounts in order to troll Samantha, and we think he's secretly in love with you.
It does seem to be obsessed, doesn't he?
He is quite obsessed. There's a fine line between love and hate.
Have we not then come round, Sam, full circle to what we dismissed earlier in the evening, that the social media companies have a responsibility to do more to prevent this kind of thing. and sort of Neil Terry comes out. You know, they've got software that can tell the difference between a male and a female nipple, sort of. But apparently, we can't recognise racism and delete it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's an interesting it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because if you navigate Twitter from Germany, all glorification of Nazi ideology is deleted. You can't access it because it's illegal. So we know it's possible for them to omit information if they want to, but they choose not to emit quite a lot of racism and homophobia and other just aggression, because actually it's better for their algorithms. It's better. What the social media companies actually want is for you to spend a lot of time scrolling through your feed so that they can sell your attention to their advertisers. And if you're busy having an argument with someone, even if it's not a very pleasant argument, you are giving them that what they want, the attention for their advertisers. So we know that they can do a lot more than they do, and then they're choosing not to.
I think that this is absolutely valid, Sam. I went through a phase where every time somebody came on my timeline with a racist meme, I challenged that racist meme. Very often I hunted down the lie in the meme and sort of, and I was just inundated with these memes because Facebook had decided. I actually enjoyed seeing these memes. And in the end, I became so distressed. I just deleted about 4 people, blocked about 4 people. And I didn't see any of these memes ever again. And sort of they're out there, but it's ever such a difficult thing. And I suppose it's also to do with where your personal boundaries lie. A lot
of people had that thing, and I did personally. Did you see that photo of the England fans with one of them with a flare up his bum? I shared that, and that's the first time I've ever had anything blocked by Facebook. It's really weird that that immediately, as soon as I put it up, that was blocked. And I was like, I think it's just people reporting it. I think people report stuff and things disappear, and this show's been reported before and disappeared and come back, and it's just like
I had that fall as well. It's got there was this. Did you see the meme with the car, the car in the flood, and there was a sticker in the back that said "F you, Greta," and people were commenting on the irony. And sort of because it was a Photoshop fake, and that's the first time I've ever had anything blocked, and they blocked that because it was fake news. Strange, isn't it?
Shall we have a couple of minutes of Tina ranting on about the Labour Party, because just before we go, because we're kind of limited in this respect, but it is massive. Like both of mine and Tina's moments of the week alluded to this. Like I mentioned the fact that there are so many huge things going on, and then the UK Labour Party are just going after. I don't even know who they're going after. Very interesting as well. And I've sent a few friends little messages tonight, and like, what are they gonna? They're going to be kicking people out for being members of something. Like a socialist think tank, we have members, and if we were ever prescribed, we have members and we have people who like our page. That's a different thing. And become a member, it's great, and you can donate as well if you want. See, I did well there. Anyway, but you know, what constitutes being a member? Are they going to say, because I've known in the past they have said, and it's in their own policy, a like on Facebook and a retweet, none of those things constitute agreement.
Yeah, they have to be able to prove that you're a member of an organization that they've prescribed. So I want to know how they're going to be able to do that. So unless they've got some, insider information on membership of organizations, there's no way that they can prove that you are, unless you're going to out yourself, unless you've got in your bio on social media that you're a member of, you know, Socialist Appeal, you know, or something like that. There's no way that they can prove it, you know. It's just, you know, I think, you know, it's just I think, you know, Keir Starmer's just trying to do the whole thing that Kinnock did, you know, with Militant, and try to look like he's being really strict with the left, but, you know, he's failing massively on everything.
Didn't they
It's just
hire,
ridiculous.
haven't they got a spy working for them now, like, or a former spy?
Yeah, and like they've probably paid for flipping Pegasus as well. That's probably where half of the money's gone, and that's why they're skint, you know, is that they're trying to find out what we're all doing. It's just it's ridiculous. I mean, you know, not to repeat too much of what we said before, but you know, you look at all the issues that are going on in society, and you know, the Labour Party are more concerned about whether someone's left wing or not. You know, it's just farcical. It really is, and I don't think it's in any way gonna, you know, be hitting home with any of their target demographics for elections or anything. It's just stupid nonsense. And like I say, I think the thing that I'm more annoyed about is the fact that they've wasted so much of the party's finances to the point where they're having to make 90 people redundant in the middle of a pandemic. And they're the people that I really feel for. And I think the irony being that this is the party that's sort of born from the trade union movement, and they don't seem to be respecting, you know, workers' rights. And, you know, from what I hear, it's not really the greatest places to work for anyway. So I just find that there's, you know, when people, you know, in the party want to criticize, you know, certain things that they're maybe criticizing, they need to maybe look a little bit closer to home. And you know, I mean, anybody who thought that the scenario was going to be any different needs to take a look at themselves in the mirror. You know, Keir Starmer was, you know, exactly, he has acted exactly the way that he was ever always going to act, and his history, you know, of employment and his record showed exactly that he was a man of the establishment. He was certainly no socialist, and if you listen to people that are in his CLP, he's only ever turned up at his CLP to vote along with the right. So, you know, this was no surprise. And anybody on the left, any socialist who fooled themselves otherwise, well, you know, more fool you, you know. It was written on the cards. And, you know, this is why I get angry with people who say, oh, Keir Starmer was, you know, he's MI5, or he was elected, you know, to do this. He's an establishment stooge, and this is what always, you know, this is, you know, he's a plant. Well, no, he was voted by Labour Party members, and had the left decided to vote for the left, maybe we wouldn't have been in this position. So, you know, the left do need to take responsibility for their actions.
Does anyone agree with like the one out, all out philosophy? Like, should people have been harder at the beginning? Like, you know, they kicked Jeremy Corbyn out, who most people on the left, like a lot of people have been there for years and years and years, but a lot of people joined because of Jeremy Corbyn. And then he's kicked out of the party, and then he's reinstated the party, but then he's had the whip taken away from him. And then what they did to Rebecca Long Bailey and all these things, and nothing's really happened apart from people have drifted away. People have drifted away, and they've lost money, and they've given members money to cases that they could have won, and what have you. Where's the line? I always think, like, stay and fight. Where is the line? Or, well, we'll not cross that. Or, if Corbyn ever gets kicked out, we'll go, whoa, well, Corbyn's been kicked out, but we've got to stay and fight. Stay and get your head kicked in at the minute.
I think people have to make up their own decision, don't they? What's your own line? What are you staying for? What's the realism that you think you're going to achieve through the party? And I think
I would say you don't, though. I think everyone should be together. I think probably we had enough organisational capacity to say, what is the line? What is the line? And then get together and say, what is the line? And that should have been the line. That should have been right. Okay, go.
Because people are motivated by different things. People are motivated by their own individual pathway within the party, their own individual path to power. And I think, you know, I think that people need to be realistic about what the Labour Party is, what it tries to achieve, and what it's going to achieve, and what its purpose is. And I think that, you know, people need to come along that individual journey themselves. Some people will never accept what Labourism is, and some people will. And I think that that's just the way it's always going to be.
I think the issue is, Paul, that there is no monolithic body which is left-wing Labour, that there are sort of a diverse group of people all of whom are used to disagreeing with each other just as much as they disagree with people to their right. And sort of, so you're never going to get any sort of common decision about whether we go or whether we stay, unless there is some kind of event. So, for instance, if Corbyn was eventually to say, that's it, I've had it, I'm going to move and form a socialist party, I suspect that that would be a catalytic event for large numbers of people on the left of the Labour Party.
Do you think the left are too nice as well, John? Because
I think the thing that I'm going to tell you,
you've seen this as well, because you've been Sedgefield through the Blair years, and then you've been through the more recent years where it's been led by socialists. Are the left too nice?
I'm going to tell you a story here. When I was at university half a century ago, I studied the Protestant Revolution in the reign of Mary. And there were all these Protestant priests who got arrested and whipped down to London, and they were given a choice. You didn't have to burn. If you recanted, you could go back and carry on being a vicar. And sort of, I read all the things, and for every one person that was burned, there were hundreds of priests who went down there and begged forgiveness and said it was all stupidity and could they be forgiven again, and they would renounce their Protestant misgivings, and they'd go back to their parishes and carry on exactly as before. And the question is, which did more for the embedding of Protestantism in England in the 16th century? Was it those few who were burned for their faith and were beacons, literally, for the Protestant faith? Or was it those people who sort of just said what was necessary to survive and then went back and just kept working for Protestantism in their own parishes? And the answer, both of them. Both of those things had a part. And there are people who are standing up and causing a real shout of it, and God bless them, because the Labour Party is moving to the right and we need to stop it. But there are a whole load of people who are just biding the time and being left-wing and just waiting for the tide to turn. And and speaking up, as you're well aware, in their CLPs and having their say, but being prepared to lose and then turn up next month and make the same points and lose again. And though both those people are important within establishing a Labour Party which bears some resemblance to something that was marginally left-wing. And that's where we lost our opportunity under Corbyn. We should have said, we don't give a damn that he lost. This is the course we're going on. This is the right course. But we didn't. We brought in this time server, this tired man who thinks the answer to people's hearts is to just just sweat blood to get their respect, and he's sort of disastrous. We need to see it out because it will turn around at the end. That's what I think about it anyway.
If there's any money left. Which there isn't.
Well, I mean, funnily enough, it's funny that in history, things like money very often have much more effect on toppling regimes than all the ideologies in the world. If this lot run out of money, that may well be the end of them, or at least the end of what they're doing. I think we've got to hunker down for the moment. And there's a story of the tree. Do you know the story of the oak tree and the reed, Tina? The oak tree stands strong, and he says, and he mocked the reed, said, "You weak thing, just wishy-washy, flip-flopping in the slightest breeze." And there was a huge storm, and the oak tree braced itself against the storm. But eventually the storm was too much for it, and its trunk broke, and it crashed to the earth. And the reed, the storm passed, and the reed popped up again. And sort of some of us are oak trees, and God bless you, and others of us are just reeds. Flippy floppy. You've got to love them all. Thank you, Jane.
I love John.
You have to give context. We do have podcast listeners, John. People are just listening.
Somebody amazingly appreciated what I said. The something so rare that I noticed it immediately. God bless you all.
So we don't. Is Labour done? Is it?
I am going to have to love you and leave you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure, but I'm going to have to leave you discussing all sorts and potentially ranting about the Labour Party without me. It's been an absolute pleasure, but I am going to have to say cheerio to you all tonight. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on, because my golly, Tina, you haven't half stirred up things.
Well, that's me. I'll always do that for you.
Agitator in the true sense of the word. And we need to be challenged, and we need to be threatened.
You've got to have somebody to come in and, make people think something else, whether you believe it or not, you gotta ruffle those feathers.
You've been a joy, Tina.
Cheerio. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Shall we all? Are we?
Yes,
is that
let's
it
all
for
go.
this thing?
I think we're all off.
Shall we say night then?
Good night, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Good night. God bless. Good night. God bless.
Keep the red flag flying here.
I think Stuart flagged to go like ages ago. Oh.